Everybody, it's your main man, Anthony Brogdon on the 1 and 2s, and I got a smooth dude on the channel today. Y'all gonna love this brother. Let me tell you something. We had set it up. My man said, I want to do it. I'm committed. I want to tell this story. So then, you know, I got a lot going on, everybody. I got a play coming out. I'm speaking in 5 different locations in February, which is in the next couple months. I'm jamming on my own front, right? And I got a little absent-minded, and I had the wrong time on the interview. This dude is so cool. He called me and said, where you at, man? Let's do this. I feel very bad, but I'm so excited to have
Don't feel bad. You know, we all in this together. You
hear him, don't you, everybody? This is, oh my God, he gonna blow your mind with this history. Watch out. Hey. And I'm excited to have him on. I'm gonna meet him one day because we in the same town. And I got
you're gonna meet me soon. Not one day, soon.
I got stuff up that if he around, I want him to be at. Check it out, everybody. And I digress to say, my name Anthony Brogdon. I'm sorry. That's who I am. I'm the host of this thing for the last 2 years, since day one, because it is my mission to inspire, to educate, and entertain you, my friends. I like y'all. I don't even know you. Some of y'all have hit the subscribe button. And those who haven't, please do. It's free. Don't ask no information. It just let me know you like me. Hit the like button on this video. Watch out. Y'all gonna like this. Ooh, yeah. Y'all gonna really like this. Hit the notifications bell for when the videos come up. You get a ding, a shock. Something happens to let you know there is new content on Strong Inspirations, and tell somebody about us. Did you see the one I just recently put up with the sister who is the national president of the American Tennis Association? Did you see the one I did with the guy who's an activist out of London, England? My man said there's some stuff going on over here that ain't right, and he tweets about it. Watch that video. Did you see the one I did with the lady out of Laurel, Mississippi? This sister made me cry. She said, I put them marches together and I don't care what them racists do. For this cause. And this ain't long ago.
Nope.
Watch that video.
That's my family down in the city.
Watch this. Watch this, brother. He gonna jam on y'all. Watch this. And so do that for me, my friends. I'm going fast because I want him to do some more talking. Y'all know this. You've been watching me. I put 2 years of my life in this documentary. I'm telling you, slaves went to college, and I named the school. Somebody said, well, how in the heck that happened? Well, there were HBCUs open before slavery ended. Who was going there? They might have had been slave, but wasn't slave no more, but nonetheless, it's during slavery times. And there were slaves who owned businesses. Now, I did not know that. No one told me that story. And I was a decent school student, and I must have slept when the teacher said, hey, I got just a day and a half for telling y'all this. And when I found out, I wanted to put it in this documentary. So it's streaming on Amazon. It's called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. And then I took it one step further, and y'all, my friends, I wrote this book. It is the #1 Black business history book on the market. And I'm not the only one saying that. There is no other book as comprehensive with all the facts that I give you. You know, I just told you about them slaves and enslaved who own business. I got 20 of them in here, 28 of them in here. I tell you what they did, how rich they became, and then how they bought their freedom. Amazing stuff, and so much more. The book is on my website only. Go to my website, businessintheblack.net. Businessintheblack.net. You'll see all the events that I'm doing. If you're in the Detroit area, I'm going to even do some of them where I'm streaming them so you can watch it. Because y'all, my mission is to let y'all hear this stuff. I feel better when somebody sends me a message, hey, I like what you're doing, da, 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 da. this is my thing right here. And you know I say this every so often that I like the word strong. I wish my middle name was Strong. And in my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to my guest today. He's a strong soul, brother. Come on, man, and tell us your name. Let's get it on.
Greetings, beautiful people. I am Dr. Ross Mikey Courtney. I am currently an assistant professor of theater and dance at Wayne State University. I am not a Detroit native, but I rep the D wholeheartedly. I've been here for about 6 years, and I'm here just to play my part. You know, the Most High has brought me here. I moved here from Ethiopia. I was finishing my dissertation, my PhD in arts practice research at the University of Limerick in Ireland, but in between Ireland and Ethiopia, and got hired from Ethiopia to come to the D.
Really?
And so I never thought after repatriating to Africa and to Ethiopia that I would end up back in Middle America. But you know, the Most High always has a plan, and for me, I always feel that in every moment of my life, I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
I love
so. Naturally, I'm here to do what I need to do to be the vessel, you know?
Okay, we got some questions for you. On a personal tip, though, where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in the D.C. area in Northern Virginia. I'm actually from Fairfax County, Springfield, Virginia, to be exact. It's interesting because the school that I ended up graduating from in high school in Springfield is the former Robert E. Lee High School, which is now John R. Lewis High School.
Okay, I love it. I love it. Did you grow up in a Black neighborhood?
Oh, okay. This is a tricky question. My neighborhood, yes, predominantly Black. My neighborhood. I grew up in a predominantly white environment. This is suburban white America, suburban DC area. The majority of the people in that area are government workers or military workers. So we were transplants into this area, Section 8 housing, you know, people that came from different areas in the DC metropolitan area that were transplanted into this affluent county in Northern Virginia. Fairfax County is one of the more affluent counties in the United States.
Yeah.
So we were, you know, Section 8 housing where everybody paid rent according to their income, which meant that a lot of people didn't pay rent.
Right.
And when we left our neighborhood, we were surrounded by $500,000 $1 million houses. So we knew who we were in this space, but my neighborhood was predominantly Black, and we were the Black kids that got bused across town to the white schools, and we're the Black kids in the white school. You know what I mean? Like, which seemed very strange in the 80s in the United States, but that's kind of how the situation was.
Okay.
So even though I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, my environment was definitely white.
Okay, let me ask you this. I want to stay on that. Hold on, let me go further. Where's the plantation at in your family? Do you know that?
Mississippi. You mentioned it already. So
okay.
Well, on my dad's side of my family, according to the stories that I've heard about my grandfather, his parents were free sharecroppers in Western Virginia, not West Virginia, but in the western part of Virginia. And he migrated through some point when he was a road worker, he migrated down south to Florida, where he met my grandmother. That's my father's side of my family. But my mom's side of my family, both of my grandparents grew up right down the street from each other in New Albany, Mississippi. So when you mentioned the SIP, I was like, you know, we all have that connection down there.
Yeah, sure.
And my grandparents on my mother's side of the family moved up this area. So my mother was born and raised in Racine, Wisconsin, on the other side of Lake Michigan. Oh. So every summer of my life growing up in the DC area, we came to Wisconsin every summer. So I'm passing through the D, I'm passing through the Midwest and having that experience. So moving here wasn't really a huge adjustment from my familial knowledge. You know, it's like being around my cousins, you know?
Sure. Let me ask you this. When growing, and I'm jumping a little bit only because I want to get it all in and get to the main points, what have you. But when you grew up in that neighborhood, how did you feel coming from where you did to be around them people? Did you think white people were better than Black people? What did they tell you? Stay away from over that side of town, that kind of thing.
Well, you know, I have always been raised with a Black supremacist mentality. even though my mother was one of those people that used the American system to her advantage, like she worked her way out of Section 8, raised all of her kids by herself. All of her children have, her 5 kids have college degrees.
I love it.
3 of them have terminal degrees. You know what I mean? So her
Yes.
approach towards what she was doing was different than a lot of people in the environment. She was very corporate, but my uncles, you know, people that were around, aunties, very much conspiracy theorists. My closest aunt used to date Gil Scott-Heron. She dated Marion Barry. You know what I mean? So like she was very much connected in spaces that were different. So I always had people around me that helped me to understand that within where I was being raised, I needed to know this knowledge and information so that I could be successful within the structures of their system. But I needed to know that it wasn't the truth. And I needed to always seek the truth beyond what they were indoctrinating me with within the educational system in the United States. It's funny how, being the person that I am with the amount of credentials that I have in education, I also recognize that institutions are designed to give you the information so that you can function within the realms of that society. And when you were talking about earlier how you didn't know that enslaved Africans had businesses and did all of these things,
Sure.
is because that's not the narrative that we're taught in
That's
institutions in the United States of America.
That's right.
Because that narrative is empowering.
Right.
We're not, the whole reason why we were brought here was not to empower us. It was to degrade us.
That's
So
right.
why would they give us any information that was going to empower us?
That's right.
This is why they alter the narratives of the people that we hold in high regard so that we think about them the way that they want us to think about them.
Okay, let me stop you there. With that
Go
in
ahead.
mind, and you the kind of guy you are, did you have a moment in high school or something where you had to question some of them people and said, hey, hold on, that ain't right?
Well,
a moment that where you said, I know better? And
I had a lot of moments like that, but I also knew that I was a black man growing up in white America. So very early on, I chose my battles with people that were approaching a conversation from their vantage point. Meaning that people only approach you based upon what they know and what they've experienced.
I got you.
And so for me, growing up, I realized I had a certain knowledge. I talked to my mom the other day and she was like, you've always had knowledge beyond your years. You know what I mean? Like, I'm spiritually touched. I know that my purpose for existence is greater than myself. So in knowing that, I have to walk a very particular line with how I engage with people, because there's a lot of spiritual energy that wants to eradicate what it is that I'm here to do, my purpose. So naturally, as I got older, I recognized who I should be engaging with and chose my battles accordingly. But really, I didn't have that revelation moment of like, so much of what I have learned is not accurate and also is not benefiting me in my life purpose. I didn't really have that revelation until I was 18 and was in college, my first couple of years of college.
Did you read something that got you here though? I know your mom, said some things, but how did you get there though?
I grew up in the church, man. I grew up in Baptist. I went to Greater Little Zion Baptist Church, where everybody is somebody, the friendly church by the side of the road. And my reverend was Reverend Roots. And I don't think that, the Most High puts people in your life for no reason. Everything happens for a reason.
Okay.
I'm a Rasta man. I'm a Ras. So naturally, this is a radical spiritual, very much indirectly and directly connected to Christianity and Judaism, but very much a black-hearted spirituality. And so for me, in backtracking my connection to the continent, to Rasta, to African ideology, African cosmology, I look at how I was raised in the United States. Growing up Baptist Christian, Ethiopia is the first and the last nation to ever be mentioned in that Christian Bible. So for me, there was something about growing up in the 80s, how I was being taught that Ethiopia is this place of famine, civil war, and disease, where we are the world and all this kind of stuff, propagated to look at Africa as something lesser than the rest of the world. But then I'm also looking at this Bible and saying like, well, why is there such a contradiction? And then eventually doing my own research to recognize that how we understand Ethiopia is not how Ethiopia was historically. Ethiopia historically meant everything under the first cataract of Egypt. So everything sub-Saharan from the Red Sea all the way to Mali was Ethiopia. But if you think about in modern times how we understand the Ethiopia that we know, that was the kingdom of Abyssinia traditionally.
Okay.
With 220.
Let me start.
Go ahead.
I want you. We're gonna.
There's a lot of information, man. You know.
I want to stay, but I want to stay back on you again. Did you have a moment where the white people tried to hold you back? Where you was had the highest grades and they said somebody else did? Did that ever happen?
No, you know, ironically, I can't really say that I was surpassed by a white person who had scored less than me in that sort of situation.
Right.
Not so much. I wasn't really an overachiever. Growing up, I was like, I'm gonna do what I need to do to get through and move on. One of the ironic things is that I started college in the 90s. And so that was the time of affirmative action. So my GPA and my SAT scores weren't super high.
I got you.
But I got into a very good school. I got into James Madison University in Virginia. Yeah. But a lot of white kids that I went to school with that had better grades than me did not get in.
Okay.
So that worked to my advantage, but it also showed me that I didn't really have the type of preparation for college academics that I needed getting into school. You know?
Well, okay. Just a couple more, because I want people to hear this. How did you balance reading and studying and being cool like you are? Because you know what I mean? Because there's a dynamic there. I'm too cool. I got to go chase the girls. I got to do bada boom, and then them grades slip, and before you know it, you're on probation to get kicked out.
I never had that problem in college. I never had it. I did all my childhood crazy antics, you know, my decadence was in high school. By the time I got to college, so there was one particular moment in high school. I won't talk about what happened before, but I went to the Million Man March. Again, I'm in the DC area.
Yeah, I was there.
So I went to the Million Man March in 95. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was there.
So that moment changed my life.
Whoa!
It was a moment where, you know, to be real, I was coming off psychedelics.
Yeah.
And I went to the Million Man March, and the day of seeing the magnitude of all of these people in one centralized location.
Whoa.
Watching these prominent figures in our community address us. There was no violence. This is the first time that I really saw Black progressives, where I saw the Nation of Fruits of Islam, where I saw Rasta men, like, you know, in congregations and knew who they were. And these weren't Jamaicans. You know what I mean? Like, it was something different about that experience that planted a seed in me. And by the time I got to college, I knew that I needed to seek purpose. I knew I needed to seek truth. I knew that many of the things that I've been taught weren't teaching me about who I was. And so by the time I got to college, I was on that path of discovery of who I was so that I could figure out why I am here.
I love it. Okay, let me ask you this. Now we're going into the story. How did you get to Ethiopia? Was that's your first international piece? And how did you get there? One day you said,
no,
I've been reading about it. I'm going. How did that happen?
All of those things. So, you know, you see this king behind me, right?
Right.
That is the Emperor Haile Selassie. That is Rastafari. That is my God, my Godhead, my guru, my connection to something greater than myself, my through line. You know what I mean? To the Most High. For me. So for me growing up, again, I had to dispel a lot of the myths that I was being indoctrinated with about Africa in general, you know, because we're not taught to think of Africa in a very high light. But I never grew up as a Black American. I always grew up as an African American. In my house, yes, people called you Black, but we knew we were Africans first. I had a picture of a Black Jesus with dreadlocks on the wall. I always had Black Santas in my house. Yes. I never had a white Jesus mentality, even though outside of my house, that's what people were propagating. Yes. It never made sense to me. Yes. So I didn't understand the hypocrisy. So there was a point after me discovering my spiritual path as a Rastafarian, really much grounding myself in my faith and putting my faith before me, starting to call myself Ras because I needed a stage name for my first tour. So after I got to JMU, let me give the abridged story. After I got to JMU is when I started getting into the arts. And I switched my major from small business entrepreneur management to dance. And then once I shifted to dance, I started getting more involved in other aspects of the arts like theater at James Madison University. But there were things that I was recognizing within the career of the arts that I knew nothing about. Because I didn't have anybody that was a predecessor to me. This is me jumping into the deep end of the pool and it's like, okay, well, let me swim. You know what I mean? So, and so I'm figuring all of this out and realizing that I needed more information than what this school could offer me. I ended up transferring to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, which is more conservatory style of training, classical style of training, and contemporary and modern dance, so to speak. So once I had transferred to this university, I met, there's a poster to my right. I mean, over my right shoulder.
I see.
That's a poster of my production company for I'm a Versatile Entertainer, 5 productions. The 2 guys that are in the picture with me, Mark Spalding and Carl Douglas Sanders, we started this company together at the University of the Arts. And we did our first tour together before we started our company with Raven Simone. So Raven Simone, you know, the child actress who's now, you know, an adult. Raven is like my sister, you know. We have worked with her since she was 13. That was when we did our first, in 99 was when we did our first tour with Ray. And we were all students at the University of the Arts at the time. We took time off to do the tour to really get to know that commercial experience. I decided to quit the tour and go back to school and finish my degree because the commercial life wasn't for me. You know what I mean? Like the type of artist that I was becoming, there was too much integrity and too much purpose in what I was doing. And I realized that they were about gimmicks in Hollywood. This is how I became Ras Mikey, because in the development of our first production, they were like, oh, well, you need a stage name. And I'm like, no, I'm just Mikey. You know, and they were like, no, that's not good enough. But I was like, well, I'm a Rasta. I was like, I'm Ras Mikey C.
Okay, I love it.
You know, Courtney's my surname. I was like, you can call me Ras Mikey. And that stuck from 99 till today. Yes. That's been my professional name. I put my faith before me. That's why Ras goes before my name. Right. You know what I mean? Like, ultimately, I went back to school to finish my degree. I ended up getting hired by this company called Palobolis. Palobolis is a dance theater company that's based in New England, in Connecticut specifically, run by lily white people from New England that had graduated from Dartmouth. But it was a good company that allowed me to explore the rest of the world. They took me on tours, and it was towards the tail end of my work with Palobolis in 2005 where I went on a tour with them to Israel. And for me,
let me stop you there. Just when you say are you an actor or what were you doing?
So I'm a performer. I'm a performing artist. I consider myself to be a lifeist, but that's a whole nother philosophy that I have to explain. So I'm a performing artist. So I have an undergraduate degree in modern dance performance. So dance is my discipline and is my career. But I do all the other things. You know what I mean? I act it. I'm a singer-songwriter. But dance is my bread and butter. It's what I made my career off of.
Okay.
So Palobolis is a dance theater company. So I'm performing with this company on tour and working with their satellite company in Israel. And I had already decided before I come back to the States, I'm going to Ethiopia. You know what I mean? I can't fly over Africa twice. This is my opportunity to reach the King's Land. So went to Israel and then went to Ethiopia from Israel for about a month. And there's a lot of stories in between me getting back to the States that I probably won't touch on now.
Yeah, sure.
But I went to Ethiopia to go visit some friends, of course, to just have my homecoming, change the whole psychology and mentality of how I looked at life, because it was a revelation of looking around and seeing all these faces of people that look like you in a whole entire country and a whole entire continent of people that look like you. So you now can't use your color and your race as an excuse as to why you are not achieving.
I got you. I love it.
Change my perspective. So there, I did not go with the intention of meeting my wife, but I did. I was there for about a month, and I ended up meeting the woman that I've been married to for about 16 years now.
I love it.
So I repositioned my whole entire life after we got engaged and got married in 2006, we got married and she was starting law school and she got pregnant. Once I realized she was pregnant, I sold every little thing that I had in the States and moved to Ethiopia so I could be there to take care of our son.
So she's from Ethiopia?
Born and raised in Ethiopia. We met in Addis Ababa. We met in the capital city. She's born and raised in Addis. Her parents are actually from Eritrea and Ethiopia. So she has connections to both sides of the border, but she's definitely somebody who's raised in the city, in the metropolitan area. So we met then, and I lived in Ethiopia pretty much full time for about 4 years from 2006 to 2010 until she graduated from law school. And then we moved to the States for the first time with our first son.
Okay, let me go there. What's Ethiopia like?
It's raw, you know. I try to tell people that and this is not just about Ethiopia, but I encourage people to live their life with less expectation, you know. And with us as African Americans, oftentimes, even as Rastafarians, there's this delusion of grandeur about what Africa actually is. And we as people of the Middle Passage, I don't think we realize how triumphant we are.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think we realize how much of a success story we are through thriving and surviving the types of atrocities that we've been through on the West. Not to say that Africans on the continent didn't experience things very similar, but it was different. And so also Ethiopia is literally the only country in Africa that was not colonized by Europeans. So the way that Ethiopians think about themselves is different than the way that other Africans think about themselves. You know, there's not a lot of self-hate in Ethiopia, but in most places of Africa, you can find the self-hate that's ingrained in a lot of their systems. Many people on the continent of Africa, not so much in Ethiopia, deny their indigenous culture, but will practice Western religions. Like you meet Nigerians that are like, oh, I do not practice Uruba. I know all about the traditions, but I'm Christian. And I'm like, wait, but you're Christian and you're following the King James version and you probably praying to a white Jesus. You're not even looking to the foundation of Christianity, which is in East Africa.
Right.
So all of this stuff is really interesting. So Ethiopia for me was a homecoming, first of all. When I left that first time, I cried like I never cried before, like a child being stripped away from its mother for the first time.
Okay, and let's stay on that. Just stay on this for a second. I mean, what's the name of the big city, and is it a metropolis? And
yes.
It's a regular house.
Yes,
is it a
all of that
land and all that stuff too?
Nope. Addis Ababa. Addis means new. Ababa means flower. It's the new flower. That city was designed by Menelik and Empress Taitu to be the modern city. It was Emperor Haile Selassie that brought it into play, meaning that it was designed to be a metropolis, and it's the heartbeat of Africa. It is the place where all major international organizations have an office because that's the home of the AU. That's the home of the African Union. That's where where Haile Selassie established the Organization of African Unity, which is now the African Union.
What is that? What is that organization?
So the Organization of African Unity was Haile Selassie, Kwame Nkrumah, and a lot of the African leaders of the 50s and the 60s during the independence, the African liberation, during the time where countries were regaining their independence. There was this vision for Africa to be united, and for Haile Selassie.
I don't mean no disrespect. When was this? When did they start getting their independence?
This in the 50s and the 60s. In the 50s and the 60s. Okay. In the 50s and the 60s, African countries started to get, and this is through the work that Haile Selassie was doing for the liberation of all African nations, because Ethiopia had maintained their independence through two wars with Italy. First, the Battle of Adwa, which was in the late 1800s when Menelik was on the throne. And then the precursor to World War II was the Second Ethio-Italian War in the 1930s when Haile Selassie was on the crown, right after
they came there to take over Ethiopia.
Exactly. Okay. During the time that Ethiopia was a part of the League of Nations. Ethiopia was a part of the same league that Italy, the UK, all of these great European nations. Ethiopia, His Majesty made sure that Ethiopia was connected to that league to protect Ethiopia. But they turned their black on black men, just like how Europeans tend to do. There was a greater scheme that they had, but just through the graces, Ethiopia maintained their independence. So through that, Haile Selassie worked to liberate all of the other countries in Africa. And through that liberation, he established the Organization of African Unity, because the vision was for Africa to be the United States of Africa.
I love it.
Haile Selassie, many people don't know this, Haile Selassie had a very close relationship with President Kennedy. When he did his world tour here to the United States, Kennedy spoke out about how he was a Prince of Peace for liberating all of this is in the 60s, for liberating all of these other African nations through peace, civility, diplomacy, not through war. Within 2 weeks, they killed President Kennedy. And Haile Selassie was right back on the plane for his funeral. His Majesty loved Kennedy so much that he dedicated the former Haile Selassie University, which is now Addis Ababa University. He dedicated the law school library to President Kennedy. They have Kennedy Library at Addis Ababa University, and his mother was there for the opening of the library. There are many things about Ethiopia's connection to the U.S. that we don't know. Why do you think DC has the largest population of Ethiopians outside of Ethiopia? Because when the monarchy was deposed in 1974, all of the people that supported the monarchy, they either left and went to where Haile Selassie had family in Bath in the UK, or they came to the DC area in the United States.
Right there. You said something, because see, I must admit, I ask questions like I have no clue.
That's okay.
That's why I got no clue. That's why I asked these. So let's go back to him. He was born in Ethiopia.
Say his name, Selassie.
I'm sorry.
His name is, he is the King of Kings.
King of Kings.
If you want his whole name, Gedamawi Haile Selassie.
Haile Selassie.
So it means His Imperial Majesty,
yes,
Haile Selassie. And his name goes on, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah, elect of God, light of this world. All of these names were given to him when he was crowned king. Prior to him being crowned king, he was Ras Tefeti. Ras means head in Amharic. Tefeti is to be feared. So as Rastafarians, that's how we are adopting his name prior to being crowned king. Many people don't know this.
Oh, really?
So Rastafarian or Rastafari is the Caribbean patois variation of the Amharic words Ras Tefeti. Ras Tefeti or Rastafari. So I'm not even going to get into how the Caribbean is connected to Rasta and Ethiopia. That's neither here nor there.
Right.
Haile Selassie was born Lij Tefeti in Harar. Harar is a region in eastern Ethiopia, and it's actually a walled city because Harar is one of the Muslim cities of Ethiopia. Now, there's so much about Ethiopian history that we're glossing over. Ethiopia is one of the only places in the world that can trace their lineage directly from Judaism into Christianity, but also is the place where Muhammad's followers sought refuge where they were being persecuted by the kings of the Middle East. So it's one of the few places in the world where you will find Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that lives in relative harmony. Of course, in the 80s, the state of Israel decided that they wanted to pull all the original Hebrews out of Ethiopia to validate the fact that they were taking this land from the Palestinians. But that's a whole nother story altogether.
Yeah, sure.
So, but it's related to when I actually went to Israel. There was a whole bunch of Ethiopians in Israel. And I was taken aback because I'm like, why don't y'all go home? Well, this is our home. Well, really, from what I was told about the legend of the Kebra Nagast and the story of Solomon and Sheba, that Solomon said the sun will no longer shine in Israel, it will now shine in Ethiopia. So the Ark of the Covenant was brought here to Ethiopia as the Holy Land. Why are we backtracking? Because we believe in that these Europeans that now want to establish this state of Israel, we're believing what they say that we need to go back there. We already in the Holy Land. Ethiopia has been protected for centuries. You know what I mean? Like,
where is Ethiopia at on the continent?
Ethiopia is in the Horn of Africa. You know what I mean? That little part that sticks out on the side, The Horn.
Okay.
It's in the
Okay.
east. So
Okay.
sub-Saharan Eastern Africa, right next to, Somalia borders the Red Sea, and then there's Eritrea above it. Eritrea used to be a part of Ethiopia and the Kingdom of Abyssinia at one point. On the other side, you have Kenya, Sudan, and Egypt above Sudan. So it's in a little pocket, and it's the Fertile Crescent of civilization. You know what I mean?
Did they get enslaved from there?
Well, I don't think that people say that the colonials came into Ethiopia to enslave them, but there were enslaved Ethiopians that were a part of the Middle Passage. The very few and far between, because they weren't going to Eastern Africa and they weren't trying to make that trek all the way from East Africa across to Western Africa to take them out of the country. So they were focused more on Central and Western Africa.
I got you.
But there were always those parts where people were. The reason why Ethiopians are known as the Afro-Asiatic is because they were migratory people and they were a part of the trade routes that came from the Far East all the way into Northern Africa. You know, the Habesha look, or what we would identify as the Ethiopian look, the Afro-Asiatic look, which is what Haile Selassie carries, the more narrow features, high cheekbones, is a cultural blend. If you know the history of Ethiopia, then you know the indigenous people of Ethiopia, the ones who are not even tainted, but haven't really been exposed to modern day religions and still practice the indigenous practices of Ethiopia, are found in the southern part of the country. Really dark-skinned black people that look more like the Bantu people of the rest of the continent, that look more like the Africans that we identify as true Africans.
Right.
Which is why Ethiopia is related to being the Fertile Crescent of civilization, because you can find every hue of African in this country. And the great thing that I realized from living there is that you recognize that Africa's not a color. You know, my wife's adopted mom was from the UK, and she was way more African than half the people that were living in and born and raised in that continent, even though she was a white woman born and raised in the UK. Her love and devotion for Ethiopia was greater than some people that even lived there. She chose to live and die in Ethiopia. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And is buried there. She didn't believe in the UK. You know what I mean? Like,
okay.
So it's interesting for me, my knowledge is a blessing and a curse, the things that I know, because I have sight, beyond this existence. And so I can see that even though Ethiopia was never colonized by Western people, in many ways, Ethiopia has colonized themselves. In attempting to be like Western people, but not really understanding how the West works. You understand?
Okay. And so he lived. Haile Selassie, he lived from when to when, and how did he?
Well, you're asking a Rastaman. You're asking a Rastaman to identify the date of the ever living. I don't. So he was born actually on the same day as me. July 23rd, 1892. So the monarchy was deposed in 1974. For me,
hold on, let me stop you there. When you say it was deposed, what does that mean?
That means there was a military coup.
Oh, really?
The leader of the Haile Selassie's military commander, Mengistu Haile Mariam, who is in exile in Zimbabwe, he formed a military coup, and Haile Selassie stepped down from the throne. And that was during the time, I don't know how much you know about Ethiopian history, but that's like the mid-70s into the early 90s was the time of the Red Terror in Ethiopia, was the time of the Derg, which was the military coup, where they were attempting to turn Ethiopia into a socialist communist nation. That was his mission ultimately. So to bring socialism into how Ethiopia was living. The idea was to eradicate everything of the 225 kings. Haile Selassie is the last of 225 kings to sit upon the throne of the kingdom of Abyssinia from the time of Solomon in Sheba. So he wanted to eradicate that whole entire identity.
Why?
Bro, why are you trying to get me to understand the ways of confusion?
Oh, really? Yeah, because that don't make sense. What he was doing good by the people.
But, well, the thing is that, you know, everybody has an opinion, and I'm giving you my opinion.
I understand.
Ethiopia was modernizing, but Haile Selassie was educating a lot of the university students, sending them abroad to get, you know, masters and undergraduate degrees at different places. They're coming back thinking that things aren't progressing enough. It's not moving fast enough.
Really? Oh, really? Okay.
And so Mengistu got these people who were thinking that things weren't moving fast enough behind him and got them to think that he was going to make it move faster.
Oh, really?
But if you study Ethiopian history from 75 to the early 90s, for almost 30 years, Ethiopia was at a standstill. There was not a lot of progress. And this is what I was saying was during the time of the Derg, with that idea to eradicate everything about the monarchy, people left the country. There was a mass exodus of Ethiopians that left during the time of the Derg. A lot of them came to the US. Many of them came to the DC area. Some of them went to the UK and other parts of Europe. And this is why you have Ethiopians scattered across the four corners of the earth, not to quote the Bible, but to quote the Bible.
Sure.
And when it comes to Rasta and our faith and our connection to Haile Selassie, Rasta is one of the few spiritual walks of life that have penetrated the whole entire earth through love, positivity, and a vibration beyond people's understanding.
I love it.
You can go anywhere in the world and find the colors green, yellow, and gold.
Yes.
Because that's Ethiopia's colors. But it's Rasta people and people like Bob Marley and those that have been really prominent in the commercial entertainment world that have penetrated places of the world with this sort of black livity, with this black identity, and people don't even recognize it. You have, you know, it's so funny because when you think about a band like Bob Marley and the Wailers, the world recognizes Bob Marley as a Rasta man. Right. When they think Rastafari, they think Bob Marley. They do not think Haile Selassie. I was that way too as a kid because that's what the world is teaching us. Why would you want to know about this historical figure? And I'm not even saying that you got to follow His Majesty and be a Rasta. But when you understand Ethiopia's relationship to world history and his relationship to our black identity, it shifts the narrative that you think about in terms of black people's place in the world. Bob's song, for instance, War, was a speech that Haile Selassie gave to Europeans until the philosophy that whole one race superior and another inferior is totally and permanently discredited and abandoned. We will always have war. These are Haile Selassie's words. But Bob propagated them. Bob, as a person who was living for this king, is now the person that people look to as higher than the person he was living for. You know what I mean? So it's the narrative. It's the propaganda. There's no question why Virgin Records made Bob Marley the forefront of the Wailers. He was not the forefront. If you know the Wailers and how they started, they were the Wailers. It was not Bob Marley and the Wailers. And when you listen to the Wailers' music, Bob is not only singing lead. Bunny sings lead at times. Peter sings lead at times. You know what I mean? Like and they taught Bob how to play music. He was catapulted into the forefront when a white man said, oh, we're going to make this guy the center of the group. There's so much about the commercialization of culture that we all buy into and accept the narrative that colonials teach us about our own identity. Look at hip hop, for instance. Look at hip hop. Hip hop is my culture. You know, I'm a 44-year-old man raised in this country. Hip hop is what raised me. But I'm raised during a time where hip hop was not popular. I always tell my kids, y'all live in a hip hop generation. I'm raised during a time when hip hop wasn't popular. I watched it become popular and watch how they commoditize and commercialize this culture to be something that's totally degrading and not uplifting.
Let me go back on this. When they did that coup, he stepped down. Was there a fight? I mean, there was a war, as you say?
Haile Selassie did. Again, you're talking about a king who did not want war. So he left. He stepped down. Now, Ethiopians will say that, he was killed and they buried him somewhere. They put that in the newspaper. But for those of us that know, there is something greater for Haile Selassie's existence. And it's never really been proven that he was killed. Everybody just assumes. So within the Ethiopian history, when a king either is deposed or his time on the throne has ended, the king then turns their life back to the church. Ethiopia, there's no separation of church and state, but the king is higher than the church. So, but now the church is the highest in the land because there's no longer any monarchy. So for some people that believe in the mysticism of livity, Haile Selassie stepped down and became a monk and traveled through the hills of Ethiopia barefoot as a Bahatawi. Bahatawis are the Ethiopian monk priests that wear dreadlocks. So people think that dreadlock is this Caribbean thing. No, I wear locks because it's African. Everything that people in the Caribbean were doing was resurrecting their African nature. How is an island going to be first? Yeah, right, the reason why the people in the Caribbean held on to so much of their African identities is because they weren't broke. Those of us that were brought to the mainlands of the America, we were broken before we got here. That's why we were everybody brought to those Caribbean islands. Right. We see if we can break it. If we can't break it, you got to stay on the island. Why do you think Haiti revolted? Why do you think Jamaicans are so volatile? Why do you think people in the Caribbean are so hot-blooded? They're carrying all that energy into this little island, We are different as those on the mainland. This is why there's all this conflict within the African American community. There's no solidarity. Yeah, we're not progressing. Sure, you know what I mean? Look at what happened in the 50s and the 60s when you were younger. Look at what life was about then. You know what I mean? I even look at popular music in the 50s and the 60s, and popular music was progressive. Now look at what they sell us. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Let me ask you this: Is Rastafari? Is it a religion? Is it a culture? Is it an attitude? What is it?
All of that. It depends upon who you ask. So for me, religion is the way in which you practice your spirituality. I learned that from my king. And for me, no one can tell me how to commune with the Most High if the Most High is speaking to me. I can see examples of how I can get there, but ultimately I have to have my own relationship with the Creator.
I love it.
And so for me, Rasta is the way I practice my spirituality. It's the thing that gets me closer to something greater than myself. And it was easy to see that through the work of somebody like the works and the deeds of Haile Selassie. His Majesty put the Christ before everything. You know what I mean? I don't discredit the works of the Christ because that's what inspired my king. How can I do that?
I got you.
You know what I mean? That would be ignorant, but because I've seen the works and the deeds of this king, I can see the universal spirit that connects to beyond Christianity. I can see the works of the Christ and what Christ lived for, and it was not for Christianity. It was for us to understand that the kingdom was within us. We live in a life where we search without.
I got you.
For our connection to something greater. But the kingdom is already within us. We need to search within.
Is there a Bible, for lack of a better term?
No, I mean, a lot of Rasta. So there is so much about Rasta that I would never be able to explain in this one interview. Sure. You know what I mean? Because I guarantee you that you'll meet somebody from the Caribbean that will try and say that what I'm telling you is wrong. Really? You know what I mean? Because there is this necessity that we have as people in the world to have ownership. And people in the Caribbean think they own Rasta. And I don't understand how that happens because my king is from Ethiopia, so, and within the Rasta overstanding, you never trade an island for a continent. So there's no way that I'm going to give my life to some island when my life is about the identity of the nation of people from this continent.
I love
You
it.
know, and that's what the king lived for. That's what all his works were showing us, which is why we've liberated ourselves as Black supremacist Africans. So it's every Rasta is everything, but it depends on who you ask. There are many Rastas, like for instance, there are people in Jamaica that will tell you that most Rastas know the Bible better than Christians, because there are things that we have to know in order to understand what's not working for us exactly. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, but then there are also, there's a mansion of Rastafari or a house. You know how Christianity has different variations, Pentecostal, Catholicism. So Rasta has Bobo Shanti, Ethiopian World Federation, Nyabingi. You have different mansions. So the 12 tribes of Israel are the mansion or the house that is really Bible oriented. They're very big on read a chapter a day, keep the devil away. You know what I mean? So a lot of Rastas adhere to the Judeo-Christian Bible. Old Testament, New Testament. Usually within Rastafari, Nyabingis are going to be more aligned with the Old Testament. 12 Tribe of Israel will be more aligned with the New Testament, because a lot of them really are cling to Haile Selassie being Christ in his kingly character, because the book of Revelation says that Christ will come again as a King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. Remember all those names I gave you at the beginning?
Right.
So when Haile Selassie was crowned, that was prophetic. And that also integrates with Marcus Garvey. There are all of these things that are involved with the movement of Rastafari and with who actually the king is. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So what we follow in the commercial space of the world, when we look at Rastaman, we're following the movement, because nobody's pointing us to the direction of who Rasta is. That is Rasta. This, for me, as a Rastafarian, when people align with the faith or the culture or the spirituality or the religion, for me, I know their connection by my understanding of their connection to him. I don't know how people can call themselves a Rasta if they don't have a personal relationship with Haile Selassie.
I love it. Question: Did he leave a lot of papers?
There is a biography, everything. Just look him up. He's got biographies, autobiographies. Like, there are books that are written on him. So much of what he did is not a part of our history because it's African, and it empowers us as Africans. That's not what Europeans ever desired for us.
I got you. If somebody was watching this and they wanted to learn more to be a Rastafarian, let's say, what would you suggest they read to understand what they're doing?
I don't suggest that people be a Rastafarian. You know what I mean? Like, I never wanted to be a Rasta because I, like everybody else, assumed it was some Jamaican thing. When I was touched by the spirit of the king is when I accepted him into my life. I'm a Rasta because of him and because of what he stands for me. So I'm not going to tell anybody to, like, if you want to be a Rasta, study this thing. No, I will tell anyone and everyone who want to be a Rasta or not, study him. Just to know Africa's connection and Ethiopia's connection to world history, world identity. Haile Selassie is the first black man to ever be featured on Time magazine. When Haile Selassie was crowned in 1930, 72 nations from all around the world watched him crowned to be King of Kings. Everyone during that time acknowledged Ethiopia as one of the highest points, one of the highest cultures in the world. This is in 1930. You understand?
Yeah, I got you.
What happened? What happened between 1930 and 1975 to where now they want to degrade the continent of Africa?
Are there monuments in Ethiopia?
There are monuments all over the world that honor Haile Selassie. For instance, when I first went to Italy, one of the first times that I was touring with Palablis, before I had went to Ethiopia for the first time, this was probably in like 2003, 2002. I was in Rome. I was in northern Italy, in Bergamo, some town in northern Italy. And I walked past a plaque and I recognized his face on the plaque. And it's in Italian. No, it's in Latin. The plaque's in Latin. I could read some Italian because I had been studying Italian because we had been to Italy so frequently with this company. And I could read this this caption of this plaque of Haile Selassie in northern Italy that was paying tribute to Haile Selassie because he changed the history of Ethiopia, of Italy. He helped Italy not become a fascist nation. People don't watch the timeline of the Second Ethio-Italian War. And when Haile Selassie addressed the League of Nations, he said, if y'all don't help us now, the same thing is going to happen to you. This is in the early 1930s, probably 1932. By 1935, Hitler and Mussolini had teamed up and were now starting to do what they did all over Europe. Mm-hmm. And so it was at that point where the UK and the United States was like, oh, this king wasn't lying. The United States let some Tuskegee Airmen come fly into Ethiopia to push out the Italians. Same thing with the UK. They brought in some military to help push out the Italians. Haile Selassie didn't even make the Italians leave. He said, as long as you recognize that I'm running this, y'all can stay. My wife has an Italian extension of her family. You know what I mean? Like, so there's always something greater. And I think as human beings, we oftentimes will focus a lot on our perceptions of things that we think are negative of somebody in their experiences.
That's right. That's right.
Instead of acknowledging the greatness, like even with the Christ, like people want to tear down.
Right.
What the Christ has done for people. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
If the Christ can imbue someone with a faith that allows them to see a life greater than themselves, let them have that.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Is there a day that you celebrate of his life? You know what I mean? Like, is there a birthday?
Yeah, like I told you, July 23rd.
Okay.
My birthday as well. Again, there's nothing in life happens without a reason. Okay. Me discovering who Haile Selassie is, I'm still like, man, I'm not no Rasta. This is like something that's not me, but this king is amazing. When I discovered that I was born on the same day as the king, to me, that was a sign from the creator that the spiritual energy of him was moving through me.
I love it.
You know, so from that point on, I couldn't deny who I was. And from that point on, everything else in my life fell into place.
Okay, I love it. Let me ask you this: what happened to Ethiopia after he left, and even into today?
So in the 90s, there was the TPLF. There was a People's Liberation Front from the northern part of the country, from the Tigray area, which is the area that was warring against the rest of the country currently for the past 2 years. So there was a People's Liberation Front from that area that came in with the support of some people from Eritrea that came in to push out the military coup. And that's why I said they pushed Mengistu Haile Mariam out, but he's still on exile in Zimbabwe. You can't extradite him out. This man killed so many Ethiopians, so many of his own people in the town square, so much so that they made a museum where the museum is an installation where they dug up part of the town square and built a museum around the part that they dug up, because the bones of the bodies are coming out of the ground in that area.
Wow.
So during the TPLF, they pushed the Derg out. So TPLF was in power from like the late 90s into, I'd say, the early, maybe 2010, the early 2000s, you know. And so a lot of the people in TPLF were students of Haile Selassie, the same person who had pushed in the military coup. He was a student of Haile Selassie's. So the person who came in to then be the prime minister, Meles Zenawi, he was essentially implementing a lot of the things that Haile Selassie had planned. He started to strategically implement a lot of the stuff that was mapped out prior to the Derg. And so for about 30 years, Ethiopia, there was some progress. And then somehow the powers that be felt like Meles Zenawi was getting too much power, and somehow he miraculously died of some pneumonia. You know?
What's it
And
like today
now,
over there? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
and now there is one of the more marginalized ethnic groups is now, there's a prime minister from one of the more marginalized ethnic groups, the Oromo in Ethiopia now, who essentially, Prime Minister Abiy had, he got voted with the Nobel Peace Prize. And then within like 3 months, the country went to war. So like those things are a little bit askew. So Ethiopia is still here. It's maintaining. And for me and people that recognize the spiritual frequency of Ethiopia, Ethiopia is saved by the creator for a greater purpose. You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
Ethiopia has one of the highest and the lowest points on the earth. It's where we claim to have found the oldest human beings. It's a place that still functions on its own time and not on the time that the rest of the world functions on. You know what I mean? Like there's so much about this place that is mystical, that is it's just amazing,
Okay. Could you imagine this was going to happen to you at some point?
I tell people this all the time. And we aren't even talking about my career. Everything that I'm telling you is just pretty much like me telling you about who I am.
Yeah, right.
But everything that I'm telling you, I manifest in how I teach. So I never thought that I would be a Rastaman that has a master's, that has, first of all, an undergraduate degree in dance, and then has a master's in ethnochoreology, which is like cultural dance anthropology, and a PhD in arts practice research, where my research is focused on how I embody Ethiopian cultural tradition and use it as a tool in my creative process. I never would have been able to fathom that as some little kid in Northern Virginia who didn't even dream because he was so focused on just his day-to-day. I didn't have the opportunity to dream because I didn't know what was possible. I never thought I'd live to be 44 when I was 10. That's not the example that you're encouraged with when you're raised in an urban environment.
Yeah. You're proud of yourself though, aren't you?
Oh my gosh, I'm proud. More than being proud of myself, I'm proud of my mother. You know what I mean? Like, because without her struggles and without the things that she did and without the type of discipline that she wanted to instill in me, and I was still a rebel. Like, I'm proud of my mom for being consistent. You know what I mean? Like, for me, I'm not proud of me because I'm living the purpose that the creator has put me here for. Yeah, I'm happy that I found it because I choose to be peaceful. A person that is peaceful chooses to be peaceful because they have the proclivity for violence. I could be very violent. I know that. But I choose this life of peace because that gives me a better sense of purpose.
I got you.
And I'm grateful that I've had my king as an example and I've had my mom as an example. Those are my two greatest examples. I say that all the time.
I love
my mother and my king are the two greatest examples of what I could do. And my mom left me to God at some point. She was like, I can't really I can't raise you to be a man, Yeah. My father was around, but he never wanted kids,
Yeah. Have you written a book or anything? How do people...
I'm an orator, man. Like, I haven't gotten to that space yet. Because I write, but usually I write more artistically or academically. So I haven't really written my philosophies. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't solidified and gotten all this stuff down because also I'm not ready for people to start tearing it down.
I got you. I understand that. Do you still dance or no?
Yeah, I do. I just did a show at the University of Michigan this weekend. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mike Ellison. There's another guy who you need to interview.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Mike E. Me and Mike E. met in Ethiopia. Mike was born in Ethiopia.
I knew that's right. Sure was.
He was born, but we're both raised in the DC area. We were raised in the DMV, but we met in Ethiopia in 2006 after I moved to Ethiopia. And I met him trying to book him for a show for the Ethiopian Millennium. And we didn't work together in 2007 because Ethiopia is 7 years behind our calendar here. So the Ethiopian Millennium would have been 2007, our calendar here. So I didn't get to book him for the show that I was working on. Then in 2015, Mike Ellison came back to Ethiopia and we reconnected. I have a new EP that just dropped maybe 2 weeks ago on the 14th of January called Thin Line. And I'm taking 3 songs from that EP project and I'm going to do a performance production project with the students at Wayne State University. So I'll be the recording artist that they're performing with to give them the experience of what it's like to work with a recording artist and still create, a stage production. So we're doing that in April. So make sure that you come out to
I'm on it, man.
The Hillberry Gateway, April 21st to the 23rd.
Yes.
The Hillberry Gateway is a new $65 million performing arts center that's going up downtown in Midtown Detroit and Cass Corridor. So
that's right. Let me ask you this: do you have a website or something like that? Do you?
I do. RossMikeyC.com.
Okay. Is there something that I have not asked you? Something on your heart that you want to share with people?
There's a lot that I have not shared.
Yeah, sure.
But I think that everything that I've been saying is what I want to share. To search within yourself to really find the purpose for your existence. Because I feel that as a species, as a human species, we're not winning. Creation is showing us that we're not winning. And so we need to kind of search differently. We got to reprioritize and restructure ourselves so that we can exist. Because if we don't, then we won't have this space.
I got you.
And so with that being said, I always like to close out most of my shows and my interviews. And actually have a radio station. So you can find all of this stuff through my website, rossmikeyc.com.
Okay.
But, I'm inspired by something that I read in Russell Simmons' book. And he said, do you, because everybody else is taken.
Love it. One more. Is there a saying that Haile Selassie said to everybody or that everybody knows him for? Just some phrase.
No, His Majesty has mad quotables. That's why I said, don't try to be a Rasta. Just know the king. You know what I mean? Rasta's a liberty. Not to quote His Majesty, but to quote Morgan Heritage, you don't have to dread to be Rasta. It's a divine conception of your heart.
I love it.
Yeah. So it's not one thing, and this is why I think as humans, we always, especially as Americans, we're trying to put things in a place. We're trying to compartmentalize and put it into a box. Rasta's not a box for me. It's a continuum.
I love it.
You know what I mean? It stems beyond time and space and existence.
Yes.
Because we are more than this earth. We are the universe. We are carbon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We focus so much on earth and this earthly God.
Yeah.
That's only part of our existence.
Yeah, I got you.
And we're not even saving the earth. You know what I mean? Yeah. We now looking for a next earth. We don't want to save this planet.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. Hey, everybody, this is what we do on Strong Inspirations. Told you was gonna like that. You can feel.
Come check me.
It exudes out of this brother. I tried my best to find people who want to tell the story. Let me tell you, like I told you in the beginning, I was a few minutes late. My man called me. I said, come on, man. I said, give me 5. I love it. Everybody hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations where we give it to you straight, no chaser. I just try to ask some questions and let the people do the talking. Hit the like button on this video because there's no love button. Hit the notifications bell for when the videos come up. You get a ding, a shock, a smoke signal, your lights flicker in and on your house, your car horn blows. Something to let you know there's new content. Tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. And to you, my brother, I say this and I mean this with all sincerity. I really do. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind, stay healthy. Keep fighting, keep pushing, keep learning, keep being the best of you.
Give thanks.
The light is shining.
Give thanks.
No question about it.
Give thanks. Received and reciprocated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Bring me black. Bring me black. You know what I mean? Bring me back here. so we can do this again. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
All right,
More
brother.
to be said. Everybody, with that, I'll say bye-bye. We out. Thank you.
All right. Much love.
Yeah.
Blessings.